The year was 2187. Earth had finally made it to the stars. After 200 years of fighting, building, and learning, humanity had earned the right to stand before the most powerful group in the known universe, the Galactic Council. It was not a small thing. It was the moment every human leader had worked toward for generations. And on the day it arrived, billions of people across Earth stopped what they were doing and watched on their screens. Then Commander Elena Vasquez was the one chosen to speak for humanity. She was 51 years old, calm by nature, and sharp in every way a diplomat needed to be. She had spent 20 years studying alien languages, alien customs, and alien history. She knew which civilizations liked long speeches and which ones liked short ones. She knew which species found eye contact respectful and which found it threatening. She had prepared for almost every situation. She had not fully prepared for what was coming. The council hall sat at the center of a space station so large it looked like a small moon from a distance. Ships from hundreds of different worlds docked there every single day. The inside of the station was a city by itself. Streets, markets, meeting rooms, and living quarters for thousands of alien representatives and their staff. But the heart of it all was the great council hall, in a circular room so wide that the far wall looked blurry from the center. The ceiling climbed so high that a thin layer of artificial cloud drifted near the top. Elena walked through the entrance doors with a team of 6 diplomats behind her. The floor was made of dark, smooth stone that caught the light of the hall's soft glow. Hundreds of alien representatives sat in curved rows around the edges of the room, each in a chair built for their specific body shape. And some of the chairs were wide and low, others were tall and narrow. Some had extra supports for extra limbs, but all of them faced the center platform, the place where new applicants stood to make their case. The noise in the room was constant. Alien voices, alien sounds, translators clicking and humming. It all mixed together into something thick and heavy. Elena kept her face steady. She kept her eyes forward. She walked to the center platform and stepped up onto it. While at the front of the room, the head of the council rose from his seat. His name was Sale. He was a Velaran, tall and thin, with 4 long arms, pale gray skin, and wide black eyes that held almost no expression. The Velarans had led the council for over 500 years. They were respected by nearly everyone. When Sile raised one of his hands, the room fell silent in seconds. "Earth," Sile said. His voice was flat and even. "You have submitted your application for full council membership. Your documents have been reviewed. Today you will speak, and the council will ask its questions. When that is finished, we will deliberate." Elena nodded. "Thank you, High Speaker. We are honored to be here." She turned to face the room. She looked out at hundreds of alien faces, old civilizations, some of them tens of thousands of years ahead of humanity in nearly every way. She felt the weight of it. But she began to speak, and she spoke well. She told them about Earth. But she talked about the long road humanity had walked. The wars, yes, but also the rebuilding. The famines, but also the harvests that followed. The times humans had nearly destroyed themselves, and the times they had pulled back from the edge. She talked about the technology Earth had developed in the last 2 centuries, the ships, the energy systems, the medical advances. She talked about what Earth could offer the Council in trade, in resources, and in cooperation. Her voice was steady, but her words were clear. For the first part of her speech, the room was quiet and attentive. Then the laughter started. It came from the left side of the hall, a low, rolling sound, like rocks tumbling together. Elena paused. She looked toward it. A group of large, dark-scaled aliens sat in that section. They were the Dreth, one of the oldest races in the galaxy, with a civilization stretching back over 40,000 years. Their representative was named Grath. It was nearly 3 meters tall, broad across the shoulders and covered in thick black scales that caught the light like polished stone. It was looking at Elena with an expression she had no trouble reading. It was the look of something that found her deeply amusing. Grath stood up without asking for permission to speak. It crossed two of its four arms in front of its chest and addressed the room rather than Elena directly. "High Speaker," it said slowly. "I mean no disruption. But I find myself struggling to focus. Are we truly giving council time to a civilization that has been in space for less than 200 years? Their own history shows them still fighting wars against each other well into this century. Their planet's surface has been damaged by their own industries for generations. Their longest-standing treaty with any alien race broke apart in under 30 years. And yet they stand here and ask for equal standing among civilizations that have been building for 40, 50, some 100,000 years?" The hall was quiet for a moment. Then a sound moved through it, not loud, but unmistakable. Agreement, amusement, a ripple of something that felt to Elena like the room had just shifted away from her. Sale raised his hand. "Representative Grath, Earth has the floor." Grath sat back down, but it did not stop smiling. Elena stood still. Her hands did not shake. Her voice, when she continued, did not crack. She finished her speech exactly as she had planned. She thanked the council. She answered 3 rounds of questions from various representatives, some honest, some loaded with subtle insults, all of them delivered in the polished language of diplomacy. Then it was over. The council would deliberate. Earth would wait. As Elena walked back through the great doors and into the corridor beyond, she did not speak. Her team walked with her in silence. The sound of Grath's laughter was still in her ear. I stored there the way bad sounds always are, not fading, but sitting. Aaron, the youngest member of her team, caught up to her side. He was 28 years old, brilliant, and still at the age where being insulted in front of the universe felt new and raw. "They laughed at us," he said. "Yes," Elena said. "What happens now?" She thought about the billions of people watching from Earth. She thought about the children who had grown up with this moment as a dream. She thought about the old leaders who had given their careers to it. She thought about all of it, and then she thought about Grath's face. "Now," she said, "we go home, we report, and then we decide what kind of civilization we are going to be." She kept walking. The corridor was long and cold and quiet around them. Back in the great hall, the council had already moved on to other business. Other planets, other deals. Earth was a small matter, quickly set aside. It had been a curiosity at best, a joke at worst. But somewhere on a blue and green planet far from that station, something had changed. It was not loud. It was not dramatic. It was the quiet kind of change, the kind that builds slowly in the dark, like pressure under stone, until one day the stone breaks. That day had not yet come. But it was coming. The news reached Earth before Elena's ship did. Every major network on the planet had been broadcasting the council session live. And hundreds of millions of people had watched Elena stand on that platform. They had watched her speak clearly and carefully, and they had watched Grath of the Dreth stand up in the middle of her speech and laugh. By the time Elena's ship entered Earth's orbit 3 weeks later, the planet was already burning with anger. It was not the loud, fire-in-the-streets kind of anger. It was the quieter kind, the kind that sits in kitchens and offices and schools. It was in the way people talked at dinner tables. It was in the questions children asked their parents. It was in the speeches politicians were already making on every continent. The Dreth had not simply insulted one diplomat. They had insulted every single person watching, and every single person had felt it. Elena landed at the New Geneva Space Terminal on a gray morning. A crowd of reporters and officials was waiting for her. She stepped out of the ship and into a wall of noise, cameras, questions, microphones pushed toward her face. She answered a few things calmly, thanked the crowd, and then moved quickly into the secured building where the director of Earth's space affairs was waiting. His name was Director Holden Marsh. He was a large man with gray hair and the kind of tired face that came from decades in government. He had watched the council session like everyone else. He shook Elena's hand without smiling. "Sit down," he said. She sat. And the rest of her team settled into chairs around the long table. Holden stood at the end with his arms crossed. "The council voted," he said, "while you were traveling back. They sent the decision through the relay system yesterday." Elena already knew what he was going to say. She had been guessing it the whole journey home. "Deferred," Holden said. "They did not reject us outright. They deferred. They said Earth needs to demonstrate 50 more years of stable interstellar behavior before the application will be seriously reviewed." 50 years. Elena closed her eyes for just a moment. "That was Grath's suggestion," Aaron said from down the table. His voice was flat. "The Dreth pushed for that number. I read their council position paper on the relay. They specifically recommended 50 years. Holden nodded. "Yes. The Dreth have been the loudest voice against Earth's membership for the past decade. They control 12 votes on the council through allied races. When they speak, a large part of the room listens." Elena opened her eyes. "Why?" she asked. "Why do they care so much about keeping us out?" Holden moved to the window and looked out at the skyline. "Our analysts believe it is about resources. The outer rim systems near Earth's territory are rich. If Earth gets full council membership, we get access to protected trade lanes, resource rights, expansion zones. The Dreth don't want us to have any of that. Keeping us out keeps those lanes in play for their allies." The room was quiet for a moment. "So they didn't laugh at us because they think we're weak," Aaron said slowly. "They laughed at us," Elena said, "because they wanted everyone else in that room to think we're weak. There's a difference." Holden turned back from the window. That distinction may matter philosophically. It does not change our situation. We have been told to wait 50 years. In the meantime, we are still bound by the 7 interstellar treaties we signed to qualify for the membership application. Those treaties restrict where our ships can travel, what systems we can mine, and what weapons we are allowed to carry on deep space vessels. "Restrictions," they wrote. One of the other diplomats said quietly. "They restrictions everyone follows," Holden replied. But even he did not sound fully convinced of that. Over the following months, the story did not go away. It grew. Reporters began to dig into the details of the 7 treaties Earth had signed. What they found made the public anger harden into something more focused. The Trade Restriction Treaty kept Earth's commercial ships out of the richest mineral systems in a region called the Caro Belt. And those same systems were being actively mined by Dreth-allied races who had signed a separate internal agreement years before Earth had even reached space. The Weapons Restriction Treaty limited the firepower Earth ships could carry, but that treaty only applied to new members and applicants. Full council members had no such limit. Earth was being held to rules that the very civilizations mocking it did not have to follow. The Navigation Rights Treaty was perhaps the most damaging. Earth's explorers had found a shortcut through a fold in space called the Mirren Passage. It cut weeks off travel time between Earth's systems and the outer rim. But under the treaty Earth had signed, the Mirren Passage was designated neutral space, open to all council members, not just Earth. Within a year of the treaty being signed, Dreth trade ships were using the passage more than any other group in the galaxy. When a journalist published a full analysis of all 7 treaties side by side, the headline was simple. Earth gave everything and got nothing. It spread everywhere, every continent, every language, every generation. Elena watched it happen from her office in New Geneva. She read the analysis carefully. She read the treaties again herself, word by word, the way she should have read them years ago before they were signed. She had been involved in 2 of the 7 negotiations. At the time, she had believed they were fair. She had believed that signing them was the price of entry, the cost of being taken seriously by older civilizations. Now she sat with the documents open on her screen and felt something she rarely allowed herself to feel. She felt foolish. Not because she had made a mistake in good faith. Mistakes in good faith were part of diplomacy. She felt foolish because the other side had never been negotiating in good faith at all. The treaties were not the price of entry. They were a cage, are neatly built, politely offered, and locked while she was still thanking them for the key. Outside her window, the city moved the way cities do. People going about their lives, lights coming on as the sun went down, ships rising from the launch pads at the edge of town on their way to the stars. She watched a ship lift slowly into the sky and disappear into the clouds. Somewhere out there, Grath the Dreth was laughing again. She was sure of it. Not at one diplomat on a platform anymore. At a whole planet, bound by treaties it had signed willingly, sitting quietly and waiting 50 years for permission to matter. She closed the documents on her screen. She sat still for a long time. Then she picked up her comm and called Holden Marsh. "I need a meeting," she said. "Not the usual kind. I need the real decision-makers in one room, every branch, military, trade, science, intelligence. I need them all." Holden was quiet for a moment. "What are you thinking? Yelena?" She looked out at the dark sky where the ship had disappeared. "I'm thinking," she said slowly, "that we've been very patient. And I'm thinking that patience may have been the biggest mistake we ever made." The meeting took place underground, not because it was secret, though it was, but because the building that housed Earth's Joint Strategic Assembly was built into the rock beneath the Swiss Alps, far from windows, far from cameras, and far from the noise of a planet that was already asking too many questions. The room was long and white, with a large oval table at its center. Around that table sat 31 people. They represented every major branch of Earth's government and military. Some had flown in from other continents. 2 had come from deep space posts and still had the pale look of people who had spent months under artificial light. Elena stood at the head of the table. She had not prepared a formal speech. She had prepared something harder, the truth. She laid it out plainly. The 7 treaties, the restrictions they carried, the advantages those restrictions gave to the Dreth and their allies, the Caro Belt mining rights, the Mirren Passage, the weapons limits that applied only to Earth. She put each one on the large display screen at the front of the room, side by side with the data her team had compiled over the past 3 months. When she finished, the room was quiet for a long moment. General Yara Obi was the first to speak. She was the head of Earth's Defense Command, a short woman with close-cut silver hair and eyes that had seen enough conflict to never look fully relaxed. She had not spoken during Elena's presentation. She had just watched the screen with her hands flat on the table. "You're saying," Obi said slowly, "that we signed away our exploration rights, our trade access, and half our weapons capability in exchange for a membership application that was always going to be denied." "I'm saying," Elena replied, "that the process was designed to drain us while appearing to welcome us. The membership was never the real goal on their side. The treaties were." Another long silence. "If we tear up the treaties," said Minister Farrow, the head of interstellar trade, "we lose the legal protections they give us too. Our ships in Council-adjacent space would have no guaranteed safe passage." "Our ships currently have very little real protection," Elena said. "The safe passage clauses in 3 of the 7 treaties apply only to trade routes approved by the Council Navigation Board. The Council Navigation Board has not approved a single new Earth trade route in 4 years. Our ships are already operating in gray areas." More silence. But the data on the screen said everything Elena had not managed to put into words. The numbers were hard to argue with. Director Marsh sat to Elena's right. He had been quiet all morning. He was a careful man, the kind who preferred to wait until others had spoken before adding his own weight to a conversation. He cleared his throat. "There is a larger question," he said, "not about the treaties themselves, but about what tearing them up would mean to the rest of the galaxy. Right now, Earth is seen as young and manageable, controllable even. If we break these agreements, that changes. We become unpredictable. And unpredictable civilizations in this galaxy tend to attract attention, not all of it friendly." "We already attract attention," General Obi said. "The wrong kind, the kind that laughs." The room stirred at that. "The galaxy respects strength," said Admiral Wren, who ran Earth's Outer Fleet Command from a post near Jupiter. And he was a tall man who rarely raised his voice and rarely needed to. Not cruelty, not aggression, but strength. Right now we have ships that can fight. We have pilots that can navigate. We have technology that is 20 years ahead of what the Council thinks we have. Because we've been hiding it to stay within treaty limits, we've been making ourselves look smaller than we are. Deliberately, Elena added, because we were told that looking small was the polite thing to do while we waited for membership. Wren nodded. And now we have the answer to where politeness gets you. The meeting went on for 11 hours. They broke twice, once for food, once for a short rest. By the time they were done, the table was covered in notes, printed documents, and the quiet weight of a decision that had not yet been made official, but was already real in every mind in the room. They did not vote that day, and they agreed to meet again in 2 weeks. In those 2 weeks, each department would prepare a full analysis of what breaking each treaty would cost, and what keeping it was already costing. Elena drove back to her apartment through the mountain roads in the dark. The trees on either side of the road were thick and black. The sky above was clear, full of stars. She pulled over at a wide point in the road and turned off the engine and just looked up. And she thought about a conversation she had once had with her father, many years ago. He had been a historian, not of alien civilizations, but of Earth's own past. He had spent his career studying the moments when great powers had been humiliated. She remembered asking him once what always followed those moments. He had thought about it for a while before answering. 2 things, he had said. Either they learn from it quietly and grow, or they decide they're done being patient. She had asked him which one was better. He had smiled. Depends entirely on what they do next. She looked at the stars for a long time. Then she started the engine and drove home. Over the next 2 weeks, the reports came in. Every department, every branch, every analysis team on Earth worked through the night to build their assessments. What they found, collectively, painted a picture that was both alarming and, to many of them, strangely clarifying. Earth had been living under the treaties like a person wearing a coat 3 sizes too small. Every breath was restricted, every reach was limited. The cost of keeping the treaties was not just diplomatic standing. It was real, measurable loss, resources untouched, lanes unflown. Technologies undeveloped because their development would have put Earth in violation of agreements signed in good faith to a council that had never intended to honor the spirit of those agreements. When the full picture was laid out at the second meeting of the Joint Strategic Assembly, the atmosphere in the room was different from the first meeting. Quieter, heavier. The kind of quiet that comes not from uncertainty, but from a decision that is already forming in the space between people before anyone says a word out loud. General Obi spoke first again. She looked around the table slowly, making eye contact with each person, one at a time. "I think," she said, "that we all know what we came here to decide." No one disagreed. The message was sent on a Tuesday morning. It went out across every official interstellar relay channel simultaneously, to the Galactic Council, and to every civilization Earth had signed agreements with, and to the general communication network that connected the known galaxy. It was not long. It was not angry in tone. It was written in the careful, precise language of diplomacy, which made it, in some ways, more shocking than if it had been written in fury. It said, simply, that Earth was formally withdrawing from all 7 interstellar treaties it had signed over the past 40 years. It listed each treaty by its official name and number. It gave the standard legal notice period of 30 days, as required by interstellar agreement law. And it stated that after those 30 days, Earth would consider itself bound by none of those agreements and would operate freely within the rights and boundaries of an independent interstellar civilization. It was signed by the full Joint Council of Earth, every branch, every continent, every representative body. And Elena had worked with the legal team to make sure it could not be undone by a single leader or reversed by a change in government. It was the most unified document Earth had produced in 200 years. The galaxy's reaction was immediate. Within hours, the council relay was flooded with responses. Most of the smaller civilizations said nothing publicly. They watched. The Valoran Council Office released a formal statement expressing concern and calling for Earth to reconsider. The 3 of Earth's treaty partners sent private messages asking for emergency talks. 2 of them were the same partners who had quietly supported Grath's mockery at the council session months before. And the Dreth? Grath released a public statement through the council channels. It was short and, by Dreth standards, remarkably direct. It called Earth's withdrawal reckless. It called humanity unpredictable. It warned that civilizations that broke agreements could not expect the protections that agreements provided. It did not laugh this time. Elena read the Dreth statement 3 times in her office. Then she set it down and allowed herself, very briefly, something that felt almost like satisfaction. The 30 days that followed were unlike anything Earth had experienced since the early years of space travel. It was not chaos. It was the opposite. It was the focused, deconcentrated energy of a civilization that had just taken off a coat that was too small and was breathing deeply for the first time in years. The military moved first. Admiral Wren's Outer Fleet Command issued new operational guidelines within 48 hours of the announcement. Ships that had been flying restricted routes were given new parameters. Ships that had been carrying reduced weapon loads were rearmed to full capacity. 3 deep space patrol vessels that had been sitting at the edge of Earth's permitted zone for months were ordered to move. They moved. No one stopped them. The mining teams came next. Earth had resource ships ready. They had been ready for years, held back by treaty restrictions. When the 30-day notice period was up, those ships flew directly to the Caro Belt. The systems there were rich, extraordinarily rich. Iron, rare minerals, the crystalline compounds used in the most advanced ship drives in the galaxy. Earth's teams had mapped every significant deposit years ago. They had just never been allowed to touch any of it. They touched it now. The Dreth allies in that region filed formal complaints with the Council. The Council acknowledged the complaints. The Council did nothing because legally, after the 30-day period, Earth was no longer bound by the access restrictions. The complaints went nowhere. And the Mirren Passage was the most symbolic moment. On the 31st day after the withdrawal announcement, Elena herself was on board the Earth diplomatic vessel that flew through the passage under new orders. She stood at the observation deck as the ship entered the fold, that strange, beautiful compression of space where stars seemed to bend slightly around the edges of vision. It was a short transit, less than 6 hours. But on the other side was the outer rim, weeks of travel closer than it had ever been before. When the ship came through, there was a Dreth trade convoy on the same route, 3 large, dark-hulled cargo ships moving in formation. Their communication system pinged Earth's vessel with the standard identification request. Elena's communications officer responded. Earth vessel, unescorted, diplomatic class, operating under independent interstellar status. The Dreth convoy did not respond further. It kept its course. So did Elena's ship. And they passed each other in silence. Back on Earth, the public reaction had gone through several stages. There had been fear at first, a sharp and genuine fear that breaking the treaties would bring some kind of punishment down from the older civilizations. For several weeks after the announcement, people had stockpiled supplies, worried about trade disruptions, and argued loudly on every public forum about whether the decision was brave or reckless. But then, the 30 days ended. And nothing terrible happened. The ships flew. The mining teams worked. The passage was used. The feared retaliation from the Dreth or the Council did not come. What came instead was something else. Something quieter and harder to name. It was the feeling, spreading slowly across the planet, that the cage door was open, not because anyone had broken it by force, but because someone had simply looked at it carefully, seen that it was never truly locked, and walked through. Aaron, who had been at Elena's side through all of it, came to find her on the evening of the 31st day. She was in her office in New Geneva, looking at the data feeds coming in from the Caro Belt mining operation. The numbers were extraordinary. Even the early readings showed deposits large enough to change Earth's resource picture for a century. "They're angry," Aaron said. He meant the Dreth. He meant the council block that had supported them. "Yes," Elena said. But they're not doing anything." "Not yet," she said. He looked at her for a moment. "You expected more of a response." "I expected exactly this response," she said. "They're calculating. They're deciding whether we are a temporary inconvenience or a permanent problem. They're looking at our ships and our resources and our numbers and trying to decide whether the cost of pushing back is worth it." "And what will they decide?" Elena looked at the data feeds for a moment longer. The numbers kept coming in, rich and steady and real. "That depends," she said, "on what we do next." She turned off the screen. She stood up and looked out the window at the night sky over the city. Somewhere up there, past the clouds, past the moon, past the long dark of space, the Galactic Council was meeting. Ancient civilizations with tens of thousands of years of history were sitting in their tall chairs and thinking very carefully about a small blue planet that had, until recently, been considered easy to manage. She hoped they were worried. She hoped they were starting to understand that the thing they had laughed at was not what they thought it was. 6 months after the withdrawal, the Galactic Council sent an envoy to Earth. It was not Sale. The High Speaker of the Council did not make personal visits to planets that were not full members. Instead, they sent a mid-level representative named Koru, a Velaran like Sale, but younger and less experienced. And the choice of envoy was itself a message. You are not important enough for our best. Elena recognized the tactic immediately. She received Koru politely, offered him the full ceremonial welcome that diplomacy required, and said nothing about the insult of his rank. They met in a glass-walled conference room at the top of the New Geneva Diplomatic Tower. The city spread out below them in the afternoon light. Earth's mountains ran along the horizon, white at the tops, green at the base. And it was deliberately chosen. Elena wanted the envoy to look out at a planet that was alive and confident and in no hurry. Koru sat across from her with 2 assistants behind him. He had a folder of documents on the table and the careful expression of someone trying to hide that the visit was more urgent than they were pretending. "The Council wishes to discuss a path forward," Koru began. "The withdrawal of Earth from its treaty commitments has created instability in several sectors, and we believe a structured dialogue could help resolve the concerns of all parties." Elena smiled. "We welcome dialogue. We always have." Koru opened his folder. The Council was proposing a new framework, a modified agreement that would restore some of Earth's treaty obligations while offering in exchange a fast-tracked membership review. The Caro Belt access issue, he said carefully, could be resolved through a joint management arrangement. The Mirren Passage could be designated a shared lane under neutral terms. Elena listened to all of it without interrupting. When he finished, she folded her hands on the table. "You're offering us access to things we already have access to," she said, "in exchange for restrictions we no longer carry. With respect, Envoy Koru, that is not a framework. That is a request for us to go back into a situation that was never fair to begin with." Koru's expression did not change. But something behind his eyes shifted slightly. "The Council recognizes that previous arrangements may not have been perceived as balanced by Earth." "They were not perceived as unbalanced," Elena said. "They were unbalanced. The data is public. Anyone in the galaxy can read it." And that was the real change she had come to understand. When Earth had been inside the treaties and still applying for membership, they had been quiet about the unfairness. Staying quiet was the price of being taken seriously at the table. But when they had walked away, they had released everything, every analysis, every comparison, every calculation of what the treaties had cost Earth in lost resources, blocked routes, and suppressed technology. They had put it all into the public galactic record, and the galaxy had read it. Not just humans. Other civilizations, smaller ones, newer ones, then races that had signed their own treaty frameworks years ago and had quietly wondered if they were also being managed rather than welcomed, had read every word. Some had reached out to Earth privately. A few had begun asking uncomfortable questions of their own council representatives. The Galactic Council had spent centuries building a system where older civilizations set the terms, and newer ones were grateful for whatever they were given. Earth had not attacked that system. It had not declared war on it. It had simply walked out of it clearly, explained why, and left the door open. The effect was already spreading. Koru left Earth 3 days later with no new agreement and no promise of one. But he left with something else. A clear sense, which he would report back to the Council, that Earth was not going to be managed by either fear or flattery. The planet was operating independently, growing faster without the restrictions than it ever had within them, and then showing no sign of distress about the Council's displeasure. In the months that followed, Earth's presence in deep space grew significantly. New mining operations ran around the clock in the Caro Belt. The technology that had been deliberately held back to stay within treaty limits was now being developed openly. 3 new ship classes were under construction, faster, more capable, better armed than anything Earth had flown before. None of it was aggressive in intent. All of it was simply Earth becoming what it had always been capable of becoming, freed from artificial limits. Grath of the Dreth said nothing publicly for a long time. Then, 7 months after the withdrawal, it gave an interview through the Dreth official broadcast network. It was careful and measured, very different from the open mockery it had performed in the council hall. It said that Earth's behavior was concerning. That independent action outside treaty frameworks threatened galactic order. That the council existed for a reason, and civilizations that ignored it would eventually suffer for it. Elena was shown the transcript. She read it once, set it down, and asked Aaron what he thought. "He sounds like someone who realized the joke landed wrong," Aaron said. She did not disagree. The real shift happened quietly, the way most real shifts do. It did not come in the form of a battle or a dramatic confrontation. It came in the form of numbers. Other civilizations, watching Earth's trajectory, began to quietly review their own treaty frameworks. 3 of them sent informal inquiries to Earth about how the withdrawal process had worked legally. 2 others began renegotiating terms with the Council from a stronger position, citing Earth's example. The Council, for the first time in a very long time, was not fully in control of the pace of things. Elena sat in her office on a quiet evening, reading the weekly reports from the outer fleet and the mining teams and the diplomatic channels. The data was good. better than good. Earth was building fast, operating freely, and being taken more seriously now, without a council seat, than it had ever been with a membership application in hand. She thought about the day she had stood on that platform in the Great Hall. She thought about Grath's laughter rolling across the room. She thought about the walk back through the long, cold corridor, Arin beside her, the silence between them. She had told him that day that Earth would need to decide what kind of civilization it was going to be. She knew the answer now. Not because anyone had declared it, not because any speech had been given, but because the actions of the past year had shown it plainly. Earth was the kind of civilization that learned. Now that studied its situation honestly, even when the truth was uncomfortable. That made hard decisions clearly and without cruelty. That did not ask for permission to grow, but did not take what wasn't its either. That walked away from a bad deal not out of anger, but out of a simple, clear-eyed understanding that the deal was bad. She turned off the light in her office and walked to the window. The city was quiet below her. The sky above was full of stars, the same galaxy, the same universe it had always been. But humanity's place in it felt different now. Not because the galaxy had changed, because humanity had stopped pretending to be smaller than it was. Outside, one of the new ships, a long, clean vessel with Earth's blue emblem on its side, was rising slowly from the launch field at the edge of the city. It climbed steadily, the fire of its engines bright against the dark sky. It passed through the clouds. It kept going. Elena watched it until it disappeared. Then she went home.